Good evening and welcome back, TEP family. So glad to have you back here again on another Monday. Today, we're talking about a very, very important issue that's plagued our fair city, which is class size, and also plagues cities and school districts all over the United States. And we're happy to have Miss Leonie Haimson with us today, and she's going to discuss those impacts of class sizes and also discuss the great work that she's doing to advocate for narrowing those class sizes, making it better for scholars and educators alike to navigate the academic realm. I'm so happy to have you here. And we're going to kick off like we normally do, family, with the question that connects us all. So looking forward to you all answering the question in the chat and commenting, of course, as well. We are just awaiting our dear friend and brother Tyrone, the face of the franchise. He should be with us very shortly. But up until that time, we're going to start. So the question is, what is your favorite time of day? And I'll go first, Leonie, and then I would love to hear your answer. For me, I guess it cuts both ways. I love the morning for solitude, but the end of the day is wonderful for spending time with my wife and family and being done with work. So I guess I kind of cheated my own question there. How about you, Lanny?
It really depends on the time of year. I'm not a great morning person. So generally speaking in the afternoon, but when it gets dark early, I like to go out before it gets dark. So in the wintertime, it would be probably around 2:30. Whereas in the summer, I love the long evenings. And so, it's great all day long in the summer, but I like it when the sun is not too high and too strong. So maybe around, 5:30 at night, going for a walk on the beach or just, anywhere when you still have enough light, but it's sort of low in the sky. And then of course the sunsets are beautiful, especially I think in the summer. At least I get to see them more in the summer. So it really depends. I would like to be a morning person. My husband is a morning person and he gets up every morning at 7:00 and takes a long walk. And I wish I was that person, but I'm not. And I just have to accept that.
Yes, absolutely. We have to accept who we are. Thank you for sharing that. You said one of my key phrases, which is beach. So that is, I can imagine that sunset on the beach walk. Wonderful. Thank you so much. The name of this podcast is Parent Power Hour. Folks, you are tuned in. Brought to you by Teachers Democracy Project. And family, we are looking forward to listening to you share with us your favorite time of day, or if I cheated, you can cheat too, favorite times of day, plural. But let's get right on into this. Leonie, share with us who you are and your organization, and we'll go from there, really delving deeply into this matter of class size.
So I run an organization that's based in New York City called Class Size Matters. And so we advocate for smaller classes here in New York City, which is the largest school district in the country and has a majority of Black and brown kids who benefit the most from smaller classes. And yet we have the highest class sizes in the state. I also provide information to parents and teachers and school board members and other concerned citizens about the benefits of class size wherever you live, because this is an issue which is too little explored and too little implemented, I think, in our public schools, given the overwhelming consensus that class size makes a huge difference to how students learn and how they connect with their teachers and their classmates, and how, whether they graduate at all from high school and go on to college. And so, I've for many years, I've been working on this issue, and it's sort of come and gone in terms of the public attention, but I think it needs to be really a focus of concern among all of us who care about education. And especially now during the COVID pandemic, it's come to the fore as even more important than ever because of the need for safe conditions in our classrooms and some kind of social distancing in our schools.
Thank you, Leonie. And you touched on something that's very interesting. And I'd like you to expound on that, which is that this particular topic has not been thought about, brought to the forefront. It's been on the back burner, like it doesn't matter. Why do you think more attention hasn't been given to this matter of class size?
Well, I think that class size did get a bit of attention about 20 years ago, and then it sort of disappeared from the public scene in a lot of areas. For one thing, there was a national recession which cut state and local school budgets from around the country and meant that class sizes really went up, and there was the perception that there was less money to keep class sizes as small as possible. But there was also a determined effort on the part of a lot of powerful players to argue that class size doesn't matter, despite all the rigorous research that shows that it does. People like Bill Gates and Arne Duncan made a big push, along with some of the both the Democratic leaning and the Republican leaning think tanks in DC, many of whom were actually funded by the Gates Foundation, to argue that this is not something that we should put any money or effort into. Instead, we should focus on improving test scores by rating teachers and schools on the basis of test scores, closing schools and firing teachers that didn't get good test scores, and expanding the charter sector in a sort of free market vision of public education, that sort of competition would raise all boats. And in the process, the Gates Foundation in particular financed a lot of truly bogus studies, I wouldn't even call them studies, but position papers by some of these DC think tanks to argue that we should not lower class size. And even Arne Duncan, when he was head of the Department of Education, said schools and districts should take advantage of the lack of funds by increasing class sizes.
Wow. Thank you for that. So, Leonie, I know you're supposed to go on to the next question. What's fascinating with what you're saying about the Gates Foundation? Why was Bill Gates, in your understanding, so invested in continuing the status quo in regards to the size of classes, to the point where he would try to nullify it by saying class size doesn't matter? Clearly, it does. If this has become an argument that he's put forth to some powerful people.
It's in some senses, it's a mystery, because he went to a private school with very small classes and actually talked about how the small class sizes benefited him. And he sent his own kids to a private school with very small class sizes. But at the same time, he was very much on this corporate reform train, which basically argued that the free market system of competition was the way to improve schools, and that we should focus on teacher quality, which meant rating teachers primarily on student test scores, and try to figure out what those teachers that got high test scores did differently from other teachers, and spread that gospel, along with other things like the Common Core standards, which were supposed to provide uniform, high standards to all schools. And there was just a whole sort of free market, I like to call it corporate reform thinking, that dominated both parties for quite some time during the Obama administration, the Bush administration, and then also during the Trump administration. So we've seen a sort of right-wing push on education that has also seemed to argue that resources don't matter so much, funding doesn't matter so much, and it comes out of a specific, strain of economic thinking among some economists and some ideologues. I think what we've seen is that doesn't work. It was embedded in Race to the Top. It was embedded in a lot of Arne Duncan's education policies which turned out to be a complete flop.
Wow, thank you for that. It's really important that we keep an eye on groups that are powerful groups that are trying to keep this system in place. And the Gates Foundation, I had absolutely no idea that they were behind some of this. Thank you so much for that. Speaking about the research that you've done with your foundation, what does the research say about class size and the impact? And I think it was a couple shows ago, we had we had school counselors. And I asked the school counselors to walk our audience through a day in the life of their job. And so if you would, after you tell us the impacts, what does this feel like if you're a teacher teaching to almost maxed out capacity classrooms?
So what the research shows, and there's very rigorous research, especially for the early years, that class sizes make a huge difference in terms of putting kids on a different trajectory in their educational careers and in their lives. Kids who are in smaller classes in the early grades do better in every way that can be measured. They get better test scores, they get better grades. They're more likely to graduate from high school. They're more likely to go on to college and get a STEM degree. 20 years later, they're more likely to own their own home and have a 401k3. So there's really a lot of very rigorous large-scale experimental evidence on that. Plus, there are a lot of studies that do something called correlational studies, where it's not based on a large-scale experiment, but they try to control for every factor. And those studies also show that class size makes a big difference once you get to the middle and the upper grades. In terms of what they call non-cognitive skills, which basically means not necessarily test scores, but your determination, hard work, commitment, engagement in learning. And why we think it matters, among other things, is that teachers are able to give more feedback to their students. Students are better able to develop a closer relationship to their teachers and understand that their teachers really care about them and really want them to succeed, and will therefore put in more effort. One of the really interesting findings about class size, and this is true in all grades, is that when you have a smaller class, kids are less likely to act up and get into trouble in terms of disciplinary referrals, et cetera. And I think one reason for that is that they don't feel like they have to act out to get the attention of their teacher. They know they have the teacher's attention. They know the teacher cares about them. They can get their questions answered. They can get their needs fulfilled, and they don't feel like they're being ignored and they're not being known as individuals. And this makes a tremendous amount of difference in terms of a kid's educational trajectory, that they understand and they feel like their teacher cares about them and can give them the sort of attention that they need to succeed.
Thank you so much. Just want to take a pause momentarily to shout out and salute some of our family that has joined us. Michael Haney, Joanne, Yaja, Lily T. Russell, and Yvette. Thank you all so much for joining and sending in your comments and questions. Yvette says, yes, class sizes do make a huge difference. Small class sizes are more effective. And Yaja says, that is crazy to learn about the Gates Foundation involvement. I agree with that, Yaja. It stands to reason that smaller class size allows the teachers to make stronger connections with each student. And Leonie, I would imagine that scholars feel more probably safe in terms of being able to ask a question in a smaller environment. Like you said, they get the attention, the closer attention, and probably even a better working standpoint with their peers when they're doing peer-to-peer learning or group study. Can you talk about any of those aspects as well?
Sure. Well, another thing about the research, which I think is really important, is that all kids benefit from smaller classes, but the kids who benefit the most are the kids who need the help the most. And those are struggling kids. They tend to be also kids from low-income families, kids with special needs, English language learners, and kids of color. And because they receive twice the benefits from smaller classes, statistically speaking, it's one of the very few, and maybe only a handful or fewer, reforms that have been shown to narrow the achievement or opportunity gap between racial, economic, and ability groups. And that's really, really important because we talk a lot about providing kids with civil rights and trying to narrow the gaps that exist in our society, the gaps in achievement, the gaps in student outcomes. And yet we cannot really talk about that if we're not talking also about lowering class size. Because one of the other things we find is that in many of those, the school districts, especially the large urban school districts, which have a majority of kids of color, majority of kids in poverty, tend to have the largest class sizes at the same time. And so everything is backward. The more highly resourced suburban communities or the wealthy communities that can theoretically afford to do this, or private schools where most of the kids are from high income families, all tend to have very small classes or reasonably small classes, whereas kids in the large urban centers tend to have the larger class sizes. And it's simply, unfair and inequitable. And if we really care about equity as a society, if we really care about equalizing opportunities for kids, we will lower class size.
Thank you so much. I want to salute our face of the franchise, our dear brother Tyrone Bombwell. Good to see you, my friend.
Hello, everyone. I apologize for my latest connection issues. I don't know what's going on, but welcome guests. Thank y'all for being here. Folks who are watching, thank y'all for being here. Share the live, y'all. Ask y'all questions. I'm here. Back to you, William. Hang on, cut y'all off.
No problem. And Brother Tyrone, the last comment I read was Yaja's stance on the smaller class size allow teachers to make strong connections. So if you have any more, please, my brother, jump right on in. Leonie, most of the pushback on putting a cap on class size seems to be that it's too expensive. You mentioned that a little bit earlier. Can you speak about this critique? Is this really a money issue? Sounds like you've already answered the question.
I think, it's partly a money issue, but we spend a lot of money on things that don't have any evidence behind them at all, and that really don't help kids learn. So I think it's a money issue, but it's also an ideological issue. And I think it's also an issue that we just don't care enough about those kids. There are economists, including the late Alan Kruger, who was head of the Council on Economic Advisors, and also the lead economist for the Treasury Department, who have done studies showing the economic benefits are twice the cost of smaller classes when you look at the long-term outcomes of these students and their prospects for success. Smaller classes would also likely lead to fewer referrals for special education, which are very expensive, and lower rates of teacher attrition. So in many of our high need schools, we have very high teacher attrition turnover rates, which means that teachers leave those schools to go teach in the suburbs or teach in private schools because it's so difficult for them to reach all their students and to get a sense of success. Most teachers do not go into teaching to make a high salary. They go into it because they believe in the mission and they want to feel like they've been effective and that their teaching is working to help kids learn. But when they're confronted with classes of 28, 30 or more of kids struggling with the material, and at the same time they're confronted with these quote unquote higher standards and being evaluated by how their kids are doing on standardized tests, it's very, very frustrating. And so they often either leave the profession altogether or they go teach in schools with better resources and smaller classes.
So I'm sorry, go ahead, Tyrone.
No. If you want to comment to that, I wanted to jump in. She had mentioned something that I just had to comment on about the whole money thing. We do have a comment that I want to acknowledge as well, but I was getting ready to say that. I mean, the idea to hear that money is an issue and knowing the way that they spend money in so many wrong ways and on practices that aren't evidence-based, you know what I'm saying, or whatever, have no real data behind it to back it up, but they just do it for whatever reasons. Like you definitely can't come to me as a parent, as an advocate, as someone who want to see every kid have what they need and say that money is an issue, right? And when kids are, I mean, we've said this before on the show, you know, growing up in high school, like you prioritize your money and what's important, right? And making sure that kids have what they need so that they're able to lead this country, right, in the future, because that's who's going to do it, right? Like you cannot put a dollar sign on the importance of that, especially in places like Baltimore and other cities similar to Baltimore, when you invest so much money in you know, in other stuff that I'm just not even gonna, you know what I'm saying, say that could not really be, you know, useful for community members, residents, and youth in particular, kids that we're talking about. But the question is, I just had to say that because that be so annoying to me when I hear about the money thing. And you know what I'm saying, and that being a problem when it comes down to that. She also mentioned that the amounts of money that would be saved, because that's what I instantly think about when I heard that before. Well, look at all of the money that's put into IEPs and having all of these different people set up for that. That would be decreased a lot, because again, if the kids were able to get more attention from the teacher, you know what I'm saying, it wouldn't have to be so much work put into their individual education plans, right? Because they would be getting more from what they do with the teacher. Anyway, I'm going to want to acknowledge this comment and say, has a number been identified as the ideal class size? Or like you said, does it depend on location, urban or suburban?
So what I can say is I don't think there's any specific number, which is the ideal class size. But what I can say is most elite private schools cap class sizes at about 15. And some of our most elite private schools like Exeter, which is a boarding school up in New Hampshire, where many of our, you know, most endowed leaders attended, they have something called a Harkness table. And I think that they only have class sizes of how many kids can fit around the table, which I think at most is 10 or 12. Wow. So that's pretty much what most people think would be, you know, ideal. I don't think we'll ever get to that in places like Baltimore and New York City, unfortunately. If I could snap my fingers, I would. But what the research also shows is that there's no magic number, threshold number that you have to get to see benefits. And this is one of the arguments that the opponents of class size reduction often use, that, oh, the research shows you have to get below 18 or to 15 to make a difference. And that's clearly not true. The smaller the class, the better the student outcomes, no matter how much you can reduce class sizes to. So you don't have to get to 15 or lower to see big benefits from smaller classes. You just need to reduce as much as you can afford and as much as you can sort of make the powers that be allow you to afford, because the money is clearly there. They just don't want to spend it in a lot of cases.
Mm-hmm. Or spend it on the right things,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
You know, that's the thing. They don't want to spend on the right things. They want to spend it on what they want.
That's right.
Someone says, listen to teachers. They know what they need and what will work before we continue to waste our kids' money. So true. They can also put another comment. Yvette, I need you to talk to you, Yvette. I reached out to you through Facebook, but they can also put paraprofessionals in classrooms. This will help if smaller class sizes are not in the budget. Someone say, wow, 10 to 12. Yeah, that blew me when you said that, that 10 to 12 number at that, you know, at the other school, because to think about here, our classrooms are 3 times plus bigger than, you know, what that is. Yvette says 15 is ideal for elementary, pre-K through 12, pre-K through 12 to 15 is also good as well. So people are definitely agreeing that 15 would be good. But I do want to ask you, Miss Haimson, am I saying it right? Okay,
That's
great.
right.
I mean, just from your experience in being in this work and all that I mean, if you could, there has not been a number identified, but if you could say for places like Baltimore, Chicago, and those places like that, if you could come up with a number that you think would be maybe not the best, but maybe possible to reach. You know what I'm saying? You could get what I'm going like that, but maybe possible to reach, because we know it's going to be pushed. Like, what roundabout would that number be?
So what we're pushing for here in New York City is class sizes capped at 20 in grades K through 3, 23 in grades 4 through 8, and 25 in high school. I think the research shows that as you get older, you can deal with a little bit larger classes, and that students can thrive in class sizes of those sizes. And I think that's affordable. It should be affordable, and it should be the right of every student to be able to be educated in reasonably small classes like that. Unfortunately, in New York City, we have many kids in classes of 30 or more, and that's simply not the way to educate kids, especially kids who have a lot of needs and who, really, really demand the attention and support of their teachers.
Mm-hmm.
What are the class sizes in Baltimore? Because this data is hard to find. Do you know?
Oh, this all over the place. I can tell you right now, in my kid and my child's 10th grade class, there is 36 on roll in her class, and average now. I mean, there's been so much going on with COVID and stuff, so some days you have more than others, but it's normally anywhere from 28 to 32 in the classroom every day on a regular basis. But if everyone was there, it's that. Someone else says my daughter's second grade is 34. It varies. Then I have someone else telling me that theirs is 33. Now Yvette says my school caps at 22. So Yvette, is that for every class, or is that just for your age? Is that just for your class? It has 36. I've had 36 first graders way before COVID, though. Okay. Pre-K, wow.
So pre-K is capped by state law in New York State at 18. And in many states, I think there are legal caps, whereas they're not the same kind of legal caps for the other grades, but there should be. We once did a calculation that I can't do it exactly off the top of my head, but for middle and high school teachers in New York City, many of them have up to 5 classes of 34 kids each. And we did a calculation that just like to teach writing or to correct an essay, if you took 5 minutes per student per week, that would be a whole second 40-hour-a-week job, which is just untenable. So when you're doing things that are really labor intensive, like teaching kids how to write by giving them actual feedback on their essays, you really need small classes to even have the time in the day. Even if you were going to work 12 hours a day, it would not be enough. You need smaller classes to be able to provide that feedback.
I do want to, and we have another parent who said, thank you, Mr. Allen, for being here. Who said, my kid's second grade class is about 30 kids, and pre-K is 20. That's really a lot in pre-K. My daughter is a pre-K kindergarten teacher. She has 22 kids with the para that comes in the afternoon only. And I do want to just acknowledge and put out there, though, because we did have Ms. Reed, an educator, who said that her school is capped at 22, but that's a charter school. Right. So, you know what I'm saying? That's very different and looks different than in a regular, you know what I'm saying, public school. And even because like my kid's school is a charter school as well, and they don't even have that. So it's, you're blessed, that, and the kids at your school. Okay, here we go. Right before I come back to you, William. Yeah, someone says some children aren't learning. It's shameful. That's true. I'm curious what districts have successfully fought for small class sizes and won. Do you know of any, districts or cities, places that have fought for smaller classroom sizes and actually won?
Well, in Florida, they actually had a state constitutional amendment which capped class sizes at very small levels at all grades. And Jeb Bush, who was then governor, said he had a plan to undo it, but he never managed to undo it. However, what I've heard from parents in Florida is that there are ways that schools can get around those class size caps by calling the classes not required classes, but electives, and various other methods. But if you look on the Florida state website, you can see that generally speaking, they have reduced class sizes pretty uniformly across most schools in the state. There are other districts that have fought for smaller classes. In the past, Montgomery County, Maryland, did have smaller classes for all kids, but especially in the high need schools, they had even smaller classes. Both in Chicago and in Los Angeles, teachers went on strike for smaller classes and got various kinds of agreements for smaller classes in their contracts in recent years. So there are a range of districts and states that have done this, but it really hasn't been as widespread as we would have liked, as I think students and teachers both need. And there really needs to be a big push nationally on this issue. As there was about 25 years ago when the federal government put money actually into smaller classes during the Clinton administration. And then again, it disappeared. So I think that it's a matter of basic equity. We know it works. We know it works for sure through the research, through what teachers tell us, what students tell us. And it really needs to be something which is uniformly, I think, implemented across the country.
Mm-hmm. Yes, all right, William, hold on one more time. Sorry. Again, thank you so much for being here and sharing and answering our questions and stuff. Someone said, wow, didn't know that about Montgomery County. So see, y'all, information, we love it, we love it, we love it. This is a little bit different. I'm just going to change it really quick, William, just a little bit, and then you can go right back to Ms. Haimson. So Yvette, who is one of our regular watchers and have shared some amazing stories about what she do and, with her students and with, just the great work that's happened. And she just mentioned that their school is capped at 22. Apparently, the school board is trying to close their school. And the vote is tomorrow. So she is going to share the link, you all, in the chat. We'll pin the link. And Yvette, what do you need people to sign the petition or something like that? What is it that people can do to help? We ain't no haters. If it is kids in the school that is getting what they need by having 22 kids in the class stuff, we need to keep that around and try to get more of that going on. So that should not be closed. So definitely please put it in there and go. But yes, back to you, William.
I love it. And you're getting an opportunity in real time on how we can advocate. Wonderful, Brother Tyrone. Thank you for doing that here. We can get a lot of support while folks are watching this show, which is why we're here. It's the whole point of us being here. Leonie, how did we get to this point where class sizes, especially in urban areas, are enormous?
How did we get to this point? Well, I think there's never been a decided decision by our society to invest in our schools, especially in large urban districts, in the way that they should have been from the beginning. So class sizes in New York City schools have always been large. And we've always had a lot of immigrant students and a lot of poor students, right? But at a certain time, I think the disparity between class sizes in the suburbs and in the cities grew larger because a lot of the wealthier white middle class parents moved out of the city into suburban areas and decided they were going to invest in their schools and make sure that their kids got high quality education. And at that point, the disparities were even more glaring than ever before. And so I think that as a country, we have never invested in our public schools in an equitable way, but it got worse at a certain point when the large urban districts became, many of them primarily with kids of color, and the tax base moved out. And there was a general feeling like we didn't have to invest in those kids as much as we would have invested in kids that were the children of the people who ran the city. And in New York City, the people who run the city are generally the real estate interest and the corporate leaders. And they do not, by and large, send their kids to New York City public schools. They either send their kids to private schools or suburban schools.
Thank you so much for that. Tyrone, did you have anything before my next question?
Just comments right now. So the link is pinned, you all. That's one. But someone also says so many small schools get closed, and then we can end up with overcrowded schools. That's true. And not even just small schools, large schools get closed too. I mean, especially here in Baltimore, like I see it. And then also slated to close now, which have already got voted to close, is Stuart Hill Academic Academy and Utah Marshburn. Utah Marshburn is definitely a large elementary school and has been a staple in the community around there for a long time. I grew up in that neighborhood, okay? And so we're talking about, I ain't gonna tell y'all when I grew up, but back then, Utah Marshburn was one of those schools that it got a recreation center there, and then it also has an additional building there. That y'all know how the schools have two buildings and stuff like that. So Utah Marshburn is one of those schools, and that's a sort of a large school. And then, like I said, it also have a recreation center that has really been a huge part of that community for a very long time. 30 some years since I was back there going there. I didn't go to Utah Marshburn because y'all remember back in the day we had the zone schools, and just because I was a block off, I didn't go there. But either way, that recreation center was used for marching bands and just other community stuff that take place. And now it is. Oh, hold on. Someone says that Utah Marshburn was able to defer the closure for a year, I think. Well,
so this has happened in many school districts across the country, including in Chicago, where they closed 50 schools. And they said it's because they were under-enrolled. But the formula for determining whether a school is under-enrolled or not does not take the need for smaller classes into account. And so a school that would be considered under-enrolled in Chicago or Baltimore would be considered a school with enough space for smaller classes and lots of extracurricular activities in a wealthier suburb. So what we need to do is advocate for those formulas for what is considered under-enrolled or underutilized schools to be changed in places like Baltimore and Chicago. In New York City, we haven't had as many whole buildings closed, but what we have had is schools determined to be under-enrolled, that they put charter schools in the building to share the building with the public school. And then that takes away either space for smaller classes or for art, music, or sometimes they take away the library or the computer room and give it to the charter school. And so all these decisions are based upon formulas which are inherently politically manipulated and flawed in order not to give kids the smaller classes they need and all the extracurricular activities that they need, which often depend upon having enough space in the school to provide those activities. So in New York City, we have guidance counselor rooms that are in the lunchroom or in a closet, a storage closet, because our schools are so overcrowded. And sometimes these are schools that are sharing space with charter schools that have been determined to give up, you know, half the floor or several floors to a charter school, and they get squeezed and squeezed and squeezed that way. And I think that that's happened in a slightly different way in Chicago. In Oakland, they're closing a lot of schools because they say that they're under enrolled. It seems to be happening in Baltimore. But then once those schools close, you know what they're going to say? There's no room for smaller classes.
Wow. Wow. That's wow. I mean, I that's it for my and for the people. I mean, I could just go on and talk and say, but I give it to you, William. That is that the games that's played is crazy. Okay, hold on. School closures in cities typically increase inequities, right? Would you say so?
Absolutely, absolutely. They increase inequities. Often schools are like the heart of a neighborhood, right? They don't just educate the kids, they also are open at night sometimes for community
Yep.
events, and they keep a neighborhood and a community alive in a very vibrant way. And when you close a school, that just sort of disintegrates. The neighborhood tends to disintegrate in all sorts of ways that are really detrimental to that community. And that's what happened in Chicago when they closed 50 schools, primarily in poorer neighborhoods, because they said they were under enrolled. But it just, and unless that building is given over to another important use, it attracts crime and you know, graffiti and sort of defaces the neighborhood in all sorts of ways. So I think that the degree to which we have schools and support our schools and have real investments in our schools to make them better is a sign of how much we care about a community and how much we're willing to really put our money where our mouth is in terms of making sure that our kids are educated and that they have a real opportunity to succeed.
Mm. Another comment says, if they close some schools and create overcrowding in other schools, it guarantees inner city kids will fall through the cracks and the prisoner pipelines stay open. I mean, anytime you can have data and have stuff that show you that, you know, by kids' third grades, they already predicting how many kids will go to prison and do stuff. I mean, I just say, look at all of that stuff. And I just feel like that, you know, this stuff, like you said, it's a lot of, everything is done, you know, like political in these you know, decision makers that make these decisions for these reasons and stuff like that. And so when you can look at stuff and kind of predict that stuff, I mean, it's you know, it's crazy. And we gotta, I mean, yeah, something's got to change, y'all. Something's got to change. It's getting ready to be election season here in Baltimore. You know, the gubernatorial election is coming up. The gubernatorial election is coming up, and not just focusing on just the governor. Yes, the governor is super important, but in each jurisdiction, you need to focus on those representatives from the House of Delegates and the senators who are representing us in Annapolis, who are there, those who will be advocating for us, right, with the governor, voting on these bills and getting this money, you know, doing all these things. So we have to look at all of that, you know, stop looking at name recognition, you know, which, you know, actually look at people track records and see this stuff is public record. records, you can see how they voted on education bills in the past. You know, you can see the type of work that's already been put in from them when it comes to education and even other issues that you may have. So don't just go by the hearsay or them coming knocking on your door this one time, you know, and saying, oh, you know, we need your support, whatever, you know. No, like really look at it and look at the things that we are faced with every day and the issues that our kids are faced with, and let that determine how you vote and who you vote for. Sorry.
So can I speak to one of the people running for governor in Maryland, who was our state education commissioner for many years, John King.
Okay.
We had a law that was passed in 2007 that required New York City in particular to reduce class sizes in all grades. But when he was at the state education department, he did not enforce that law. And so the Department of Education here in New York City, actually class sizes grew very rapidly after that law was passed. And he made no effort to enforce the law. And I went back and actually read his PhD thesis, which talked about the importance of small classes. But what I can tell you is that when he was at the state education department, this was not an issue where he put any emphasis on. And in fact, he really let our Department of Education get away with violating the law.
Wow. Thank you for that information. You know, that I really thank you for that information. You know, that is important to know. And like that's actually what we have to do, right? When we come to put in people in decision-making seats and stuff, we have to really look at, again, the track record and what's happened. And although she said he wrote that, you know, before that it was important, now that he's in this position, it was not implemented, nor, you know, all that stuff changed. So when you get in certain seats of power, when you get in certain arenas, your morals may change, okay? And the things that you feel and you once stood for may change. So, you know, we have to look at the work that they've done, folks. Just definitely look at the work that they've done. That info about John King is an eye-opener. It is. And since this is, you know, I can't really get into all the political stuff on here, but y'all, we can talk about that on the phone. This is definitely, hold on, let me acknowledge we are also a citywide school, so our kids come from across the city. Okay, hold on. See if they close. Okay, let me go to the. I'm sorry. Okay, this is definitely a whole show we need to have. School closings. The state keeps not giving the city the money for the capital improvements we need. As I think through the class size issue, I feel like it is the one mandate, if funded, that could fix so many of the challenges we face in city schools. I totally agree. You want to add anything? Any thoughts to that?
I'm in complete agreement with this. It's something which all the research shows makes a huge difference in the lives of kids and for teachers as well. And it's a crying shame that we're not doing the one thing that we know for sure would work to improve our schools when we have tried almost everything else.
Yep. Last comment from me, y'all. Thank y'all again, folks, for being here, Miss Haimson, because as we're approaching the last few minutes, I definitely want to give William a chance to do any of our closing stuff. Thank you all for being here, commenting and all that stuff like that. I'm so glad I finally got to jump on my internet, started working, and I got to meet you, Miss Haimson. Sorry I missed the first half of the show, but glad to be here. We do have another comment that say, when they haven't done their job, they as in elected officials and, you know, people in positions of power or running for positions of power, stop saying you're voting for the less of the evils. Your vote counts. That's absolutely right. So just want to do that, y'all. Of course, from my end, thank everyone for being here. Share this live, let this information get out there to other people. Host a watch party for this so that people can, you know, get a better understanding of this. And all that good stuff. And I will see y'all on Thursday at Tyrone's house. To you, William.
You know, a couple key points that you both brought out there, Tyrone, about making sure. I was just about to message you in the chat, and you said it. Check the track record of the politicians. like you said, the things that they voted on, the policies that they voted on, co-wrote, what have you, are a matter of public record. Ms. Leonie clearly has done her research and homework about these institutions that are trying to push policies in the public sphere. And we heard that, the Gates Foundation, who Mr. Gates himself and his children are, private parochial school former attendees. I don't know how the age of his children. And so the question must be, why would those folks try to push policies that he would not like or never himself encountered? It's very interesting to find those kind of questions out, those kind of reading between the lines and trying to figure out who is pushing the policy that's being made. So thank you so much for that, both of you, that great banter there between you both. Ms. Leonie, how are you advocating, if you could tell Baltimore City here, the ears of Baltimore City that are listening, as you can see, our wonderful, great, and engaged audience comes through every week. How are you advocating in New York about this issue? And how would you suggest, if you would, Baltimore City parents could try to make those changes here?
So we're advocating for laws to be passed at both the city level and the state level that would cap class sizes at the sizes that I mentioned earlier, no more than 20 in K through 3, 23 in 4 through 8, and 25 in high school. And so that's, we actually had a bill that had 41 out of 50 city council members signing on to the bill, which is a super majority that could withstand any veto by the mayor, but the Speaker of the House would not let that come to a vote. So we're asking that that bill be resubmitted in this session with a bunch of new city council members, and also the bills at the state level still live on. So we're going to be pushing for those. I imagine, I don't know, but do you have, I don't think you have an elected school board in Baltimore, is that right? Are you
That's
under mayor
correct.
state control, is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so that means that what I would do is, since you're having an election for governor, I would reach out to the different candidates and ask them what they would do about this, specifically for Baltimore schools, whether they would provide resources and a plan to lower class sizes in the Baltimore public schools, rather than close more schools and expand the charter sector. Really what we need to do is invest in our public schools. And as parents and voters, I would ask all the people running for legislature and the candidates for governor what they intend to do about this, if anything. And you
Leonie,
can find more information about the proven benefits of smaller classes on my website at www.classsizematters.org. I also have a Twitter account at Leonie Haimson, which I can put in the chat, or you guys can put in the chat. And you can follow me on Twitter, or we have a Facebook page, a Class Size Matters Facebook page as well. But I have lots of fact sheets and links to the study which show how smaller classes makes a huge difference in terms of student outcomes.
That would be superb if you could do that, or maybe our producer can do that, or Tyrone, I'm not sure. But lost my train of thought. What was I gonna say? In terms of advocacy, did you have another one, Tyrone? I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, and Rebecca has put on the website, thank you. In terms of the advocacy, it is profoundly important that we take those steps as a city to do that. I wanted to ask you, Ms. Leonie, do you see light at the end of the tunnel? Do you see some of the change that you are pushing for beginning to take root anywhere in the city, in New York City?
I think we have a stronger consensus that we've ever had before in New York City, that this is what we need to really improve our schools and provide real equity to New York City students. But whether we have the political will in terms of the people who run the city to do this, I have yet to be convinced of. We have a new mayor, Mayor Eric Adams. I'm not entirely clear on what his position is on this issue. I'm hoping that he will, if the city council passes this law, I'm hoping that he will not veto it, and he will decide that it's really in his best interest to do the one thing that we know will work to really improve education for our kids.
Thank you so much. Definitely hard to read the new mayor on a cavalcade of issues as I've observed from here. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for your expertise, your advocacy, your willingness to come on and inform us about New York City. And of course, Tyrone and I have been blessed to speak with school leaders, such as yourself, advocacy leaders through different urban areas. And we see that the things that are happening in New York City, Chicago, as Tyrone mentioned, also Philadelphia, are truly reflected right back here in Baltimore City. Not much difference at all. Therefore, we look to try to, kind of galvanize a strategy for these changes on these different fronts. But thank you so much. Family, thank you so much for joining us. It is 6:01. Join us Thursday, Ms. Leonie. We'd love to have you on Thursday at Tyrone's house, where Tyrone is the host and I am simply a wallflower on Thursdays, where he helms the show there. Folks, please join us in on Thursday to prepare again for next Monday's show. As always, thank you all for chiming in. I want to thank by name Michael, Joanne, Yaja, Yvette. Thank you all so much for always, you know what, Tyrone, whenever you're not here, they like step up. You must contact them, and they come and step up and step in, and they fill the void as much as possible till you join. So we thank you all so much, and take care of yourselves. And thank you again, Ms. Leon.
Thank you for having me.